who is about 22 years old. Okay, so this she's got an amazing story, and we may look at her again in the coming weeks. I'm fascinated by her story. I love her story, and the power of her voice and the so looking at our 22, youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history, committed to connecting literacy to the project of democracy. He considers reading and writing to be instruments of social change. And a number of years ago, and I was on a committee to kind of talk about our curriculum here at Penn, literacy, being able to read and write, is a national security matter. Being able to read and write is vital to our survival as a nation, as a people, as individuals. It's a matter of national security. Because if we can't read and write, we cannot challenge stupid ideas. Right? So her mother was an English teacher. She began writing poems as a child, finding her voice as she assembled words on the page. Where other young poets turn inward, she draws inspiration from events in the news. In an interview with Adil Hassan, she talks about what she felt at the time. I grew up at this incredibly odd intersection in Los Angeles, where it felt like the Black Hood met Black elegance, met white gentrification, met Latin culture, met wetlands. And what's interesting about where she's talking about, it's actually tied to the book. The Japanese are unable to own their property because they're not citizens. And so when the Japanese move out, other minorities move in. Traversing between these worlds, either to go to a private school in Malibu or then come back home to my family's two-bedroom apartment, gave me an appreciation for different cultures and realities, but also made me feel like an outsider. So if you've ever read The Hate You Give, she seems to live a very parallel life to the protagonist that sound like a similar kind of story. Okay, a little bit. I'm sure my single mother, Joan Wicks, might describe me as a precocious child, but looking back in elementary school, I often self-described myself as a plain, weird child. I spent most of elementary school convinced that I was an alien, literally. And how many of you have felt like an outsider? How many of you have ever felt like an outsider in your life? I've got some hands in the room. Okay? I know I have. Cool. Okay. It's been a remarkable journey for Ms. Gorman, who has traveled from feeling like an alien, becoming the first youth poet of Los Angeles, and 3 years later becoming the first National Youth Poet Laureate, and now the youngest inaugural poet in U.S. history. We're going to listen to her speak before we actually listen to her poem. And I want you to think about some of the things that she has to say. So the questions that she's asking, or that we're asking as we kind of listen. What does she say in the TED Talk that stands out to you? So that's the first one. What is it that she has to say that stands out to you? So if you're in the room, I recommend maybe pull out a notebook, a little fashion notebook. Take some notes. What does she say in the talk that stands out for you and why? If you've ever encountered poetry that, like the example she gives, has something interesting to say about politics and democracy, what examples come to mind? How might you answer her key questions? Whose shoulders do you stand on, and what do you stand for? So folks at home, to mitigate any problems with sound, little bit, go ahead and turn your camera off until we come back.
I have two questions for you. One, whose shoulders do you stand on? And two, what do you stand for? These are two questions that I always begin my poetry workshop with students because at times poetry can seem like this dead art form for like old white men who just seem like they were born to be old, like Benjamin Button or something. And I ask my students these two questions, and then I share how I answer them, which is in these three sentences that go, I am the daughter of black writers, were descended from freedom fighters who broke the chains and changed the world. They call me. And these are words I would teach in a mantra before every single poetry performance. In fact, I was like doing it in the corner there, I was making it. And so I repeat them to myself as a way to gather myself because I'm not sure if you know, but public speaking is pretty terrifying. I know I'm on stage and I have my heels, I look all glam, but I'm horrified. Um, and the way in which I kind of strengthen myself is by having this mantra. Most of my life, I was particularly terrified of speaking up because I had a speech impediment, which made it difficult to pronounce certain letters, sounds, and I felt like I was fine writing on the page. But once I got on stage, I was worried my words would jumble and stumble. What was the point in trying not to muddle these thoughts in my head? Everything's already been said before. But finally, I had a moment of realization where I thought if I choose not to speak out of fear, then there's no one that my silence is standing. And so I came to realize that I cannot standing to the side, standing silent. I must find the strength to speak up. And one of the ways I do that is through this mantra where I call back to what I call honorary ancestors. These are people who might not be related to you by blood or by birth, but who are more than worth saying their name because you stand on the shoulders all the same. And it's only from the height of these shoulders that we might have sight to see the mighty power of poetry, the power of language made accessible, expressible. Poetry is interesting because not everyone is going to become a great poet. But anyone can read, anyone can enjoy poetry. And it's this openness, this accessibility of poetry that makes it the language of people. Poetry has never been the language barrier. It's always been the language of vision. And it's this connection making that makes poetry, yes, powerful, but it also makes it political. One of the things that irritates me to no end is when I get that phone call and it's usually from a white man, and he says, "Ma'am, Amanda, we love your poetry. We would love to get you to write a poem on this subject, but don't make it political." Which to me sounds like I have to draw a square, or not make it a rectangle, or like build a car, or not make it a vehicle. It doesn't make much sense. Because all art is political. The decision to create, the artistic choice to have a voice, the choice to be heard is the most political act of all. And by political, I mean poetry is political in at least three ways. One, what stories you tell, when we're telling them, how we're telling them, if we're telling them, why we're telling them, says so much about the political beliefs we have about what types of stories matter. Secondly, who gets to have the stories told? I'm talking who is legally allowed to read, who has the resources to be able to write, who will be leading in our classrooms. It says a lot about the political and educational systems that all these stories and storytellers exist in. Lastly, poetry is political because it's preoccupied with people. If you look at history, notice that tyrants often go after the poets and the creatives first. They burn books. They try to get rid of poetry and the language arts because they're terrified. Poets have this phenomenal potential to connect the beliefs of the private individual with the cause of change of the public, the population, the polity, the political movement. And when you leave here, I really want you to try to hear the ways in which poetry is actually at the center on the most political questions of what it means to be a democracy. Maybe later you're going to be at a protest and someone's going to have a poster that says, they buried us, but they didn't know we were asleep. That's poetry. You might be in your U.S. history class and the teacher may play a video of Martin Luther King Jr. saying, we will be able to heal out of this mountain of despair, a stone of hope. That's poetry. Or maybe even here in New York City, you're going to go visit the Statue of Liberty, where there's a sonnet that declares, as Americans, give us you're tired, you're poor, your huddled masses yearn to be free. So you see, when someone asks me to write a poem that's not political, what they're really asking me is to not ask charged and challenging questions in my poetic work. And that does not work because poetry is always at the pulse of the most dangerous and the most daring questions that a nation or a world might face. What past do we stand on as a people, and what future as a people do we stand for? And the thing about poetry is that it's not really about having the right answers, it's about asking these right questions about what it means to be a writer doing right by your words and your actions. And my reaction is to pay honor to the shoulders of people who use their pens to roll and roll, so I might have a mountain of hope on which to stand, so I might understand the power of telling stories that matter no matter what. That I might realize that if I choose, not out of fear, but out of courage to speak, then there's something unique that my words can become. And all of a sudden, that fear that my words might jumble and stumble go away as I'm humbled by the thoughts of thousands of stories a long time coming that I know are strumming inside me as I celebrate those people in their time who stood up for this little black girl to cry, as I celebrate and call their names all the same. These people who seem like they were just born to be bold. Maya Angelou, Ntozake Shange, Phyllis Wheatley, Lucille Clifton, Gwendolyn Brooks, Joan Wicks, Audre Lorde, and so many more. It might feel like every story has been told before, but the truth is, no one's ever told my story in the way I would tell it as the daughter of Black writers who descended from freedom fighters who broke the chains and changed the world. They call me. I call them. And one day I'll write a story right by writing it into the tomorrow on this earth more than worth standing for.
All right, so the key question, I'm gonna put these up in chat, so you can see them and I don't have to reshare. There they are. Boom. There we go. What did she say that stands out for you? What did she say that stands out for you? And why? Always why? Have you ever encountered poetry that, like the example she gives, has something interesting to say about politics and democracy? What examples come to mind? How might you answer her key questions? Whose shoulders do you stand on, and what do you stand for? So how do we approach these? Which ones do you want to do? What link left out? There's something at the very end. Everybody hear a little bit more. They call. They call. These previous poets call to me. I hear them. And I have to speak too. What do you got? What did you notice? What did you notice? What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? Got anything there?
She was talking really fast, so I didn't write anything down. And she was talking so fast, I couldn't even process it. But I don't even know. She was just saying that like everything that is important is political. It's like voice that stands out to people is, I don't know.
You're, I mean, you heard a lot.
Yeah.
You heard a lot. You actually heard a lot.
When she said about how she didn't want to stand up out of fear or stuff like that, and then towards the end, she like recapped and was like, I'm standing up for courage and everything. That stuck out to me because she was like explaining how there was like something in her that just told her that she needed to speak out on stuff that she had inside of her and all that jazz.
We've seen that this year. Lots of people saying no more. No more. I'm tired of this. Yeah, absolutely.
She said two things that really stood out to me. It's like when people ask her not to write politically, they're asking not to use charge questions about the future and like change. And then she also said like near the end that they say every story has been told before, but they never told my story how I read it.
That's right. Yeah. So I mean, there's this fear when we tell stories and we're just saying the same thing over and over and over again. But you know, it's you pointed out, right? So this story exists elsewhere. This one, right? But you did not know this story, right? Is that right? Or,
Where she said like remember it was like a tyrant that this thing they do is like bring down like poetry and like library.
right. Yeah. Time goes after the art, and the artist. Yeah, she had a speech accompaniment and overcame that and spoke with tremendous inspiration. You can hear elements of it, but man, she does a really nice job of somebody who has reason to kind of be concerned about public speaking. Go ahead.
With the last quote I said was writing the story how I would write it. I feel like it's like really applicable to like this how it's written like history books because we knew about like I personally like I knew about like the Pearl Harbor and the effect it had on America and like what they did as a result as like revenge for it, but I never knew what they did to people that were like Asian American descent because of what happened at Pearl Harbor and because of that war.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Anything else? All art is political. Her question, she asked a question, who are we reading in our classroom? And that's a powerful statement for her to make, an important question for her to ask. And it's why I selected some of the works that we're going to be reading. To kind of challenge myself to read artists who I've not read before, or who I haven't read in a long time. People who are going to present a different perspective than the one that I come from. And I'm elected. I'm an old one. Right? We're going to be, certainly confronting that and looking at those things. Whose shoulders do you stand on? And what do you stand for? How do you go about answering those? I love those. This goes back to a little bit of the personal narrative that I asked you to write at the very beginning of the year. Whose shoulders do you stand on and what do you stand for? Because if you don't stand for anything, you could sit down. Take your seat. You're not going to get anywhere. But if you don't stand for anything, you better take your seat. What would you think if I told you that I stand on your shoulders? I don't stand just merely on the shoulders of my family and my ancestors. I stand on yours as well. You teach me things. I have things to learn from you. You have things to say. And they inform things that I do. the connections that I made, and kind of how I plan my lessons day to day. I try to respond as much as I can to this moment. Anybody have any questions about what she said? Any other thoughts about what she had said? Nice and neat. So. Anybody typing? Okay. I'll give you a second. I like your the yellow glitter, kind of the yellow eye. Was yours green?
What was my top?
Would you like to hear more from her? Okay. Here we are. Good. Probably open up the channel thing so people can see that too. Is it coming? You almost there? You can unmute too. There it is. So, disagreement that all art is political. Art is what the artist intends it to be. If the artist intended it to be political, it'd be wrong to do art. Art is what the artist makes. There are, certainly, I can agree with that in a lot of ways. We think of love sonnet. Is the love sonnet political? Sometimes, but not all.
I think all art is like open for your interpretation.
Okay.
Like everyone can take it for different.
Okay.
I think all art is political because
Okay. If it's rooted in the person's personal experience, then it becomes political.
I think art is political artists and everybody else out in the world, everyone else is gonna have their,
So once it goes out there,
it's not just.
it's no longer the artist.
Yeah, you can't tell people what to do.
You can't tell people how to respond. Okay. All right. Other thoughts? So let's take a look. Occasional poetry. Is poetry written for an occasion? And there are a bunch of other poems that are kind of mentioned here and linked here. We've got Tennyson's The Charge of the Light Brigade. Happily, 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 onward all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charged for the guns, he said, into the valley of death rode the 600. Long poem. The day the lady died on the death of Billie Holiday. So sometimes they're, commissioned. Most famous commissioned poem is Virgil's Aeneid. The emperor asked Virgil to write this poem, explains how the Roman Empire was built and created. And so Virgil writes this epic poem to describe how the Roman Empire was built and created. Robert Frost read The Gift outright for President Kennedy's inauguration. Okay, thanks, Steve. And the president asked him to change the line, the final line. In 2013, President Obama asked Richard Blunt Blanco is the inaugural poet. Mr. Blanco's occasional poem, One Today, describes a country under one sun and one light, where people toil on one ground, our ground. Reminiscent of Carl Sandburg's Chicago and Walt Whitman's I Hear America Sing. And then, of course, we have Langston Hughes, who responded to I Hear America Sing. A different kind of response. Writing occasional poems is nothing new for Ms. Gorman. She composed In This Place of American Lyric at the Library of Congress, Smith's installation as U.S. Poet Laureate. After watching Dr. Christine Blasey Ford testify at confirmation hearing of Brett Kavanaugh, she wrote to describe that experience and read his poem in a PBS interview. So you've got access to all of these different ways. In late December, you want to kind of imagine yourself in this position. In late December, Ms. Gorman was contacted by the Biden Inaugural Committee, given no specific instructions on what to write, but was urged to focus on unity and hope. So unity and hope. You want to kind of be looking for references to that. She had written most of the inaugural poem before the January 6th siege at the U.S. Capitol, but stayed awake late into the night to finish, adding verses about the apocalyptic scene that unfolded at the Capitol that day. We're going to look at the poem, but I want you to think about it. If you were asked to write a poem to speak to the moment we are in by an inauguration committee, what are some of the things that you would want it to communicate? And why? So imagine if you were asked to write a letter, or a speech, or a poem. You were asked to write a poem, like, letters are pretty easy to write. Unfortunately, we don't have the entirety of the text in the handout that I'm giving you right now, so you might listen for that moment. But we're going to take a look at what she has to say in this poem. We're going to listen to her, and we're going to read the poem. Well, what would you talk about? What are the things that you would talk about? What moment are we in? What would you do? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, yeah, a lot. I would like there's like problems and like for power and like almost borderline like terror. It's like really destroying them.
A lot. You know? So how do you try to tackle them? There's some really cool things that she does within here, within this poem, and some of them I'm going to point out. But we've got access to text of it, and you guys physical copy. But we're going to watch her first. And unfortunately, I need to find it. Trying to grab this arm. It's not to be right. It's really weak line. But right away in the title, what does the title remind you of? Does it remind you of anything?
Did you say like that's all Martin Luther King quote was like something of despair was
Right, and that Martin Luther King quote that kind of explains why the monument for him is him emerging from a block of stone. So yeah, could it be? Might be a little bit late there. What else? What else does this title
I misunderstand.
Uh,
I live, that's the first thing I came to.
We can all line this up. See, you got it, man. That's what I was thinking. City upon a hill. We shall be as a city upon a hill. The eyes of the world are. If we fail in this endeavor, we'll become a liar. And so we're in the process of reclining that hill, making our claim, establishing our status on the hill. So let's see here. Which one? Let's take a look at. Move on. I call that our ghost light. Right, you guys see YouTube, right? Yeah. Go ahead and turn on the camera so we can video you in.
Mr. President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade, we brave the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is hours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken, but simply unfinished. We, the successors of the country in the time, were a skinny black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother. His dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms. We reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieve, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hope, that even as we tired, we try, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, but because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig trees, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise of blade, the hill we climb, if only we bear it, because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the path we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared at inception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So So while once we asked, how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than one we were left with every breath from my bronze pounded chest. We will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold-winged hills of the west. We will rise from the windswept northeast where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake-rimmed cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful will emerge battered and beautiful when day comes. We step out of the shade of flame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
So some good stuff going on there. And let me share with the folks at home the text. And ultimately, if you guys get your Chromebook, it might be easier to read on the Chromebook, but you also have the physical copy marked up. All right? And so let me share a link. All right, here we go. All right, so take a look at that. Take a look at it, dive into it. If you're at home, you're probably gonna have to probably may not have a printer. So go ahead and take notes off to the side on a notebook, perhaps. And then you guys, what is it that you see in this poem? So give it a read. It's important to read poetry more than once before you start to get at it. Okay. things that stand out? Words, sentences, phrases. What do you recognize elsewhere? Are there any rhymes that we found? I wonder how often that comes naturally to her with a rhyme. Where does she cite things that are going on? How does sound contribute to meaning? What's going on with the light? How can we tell it's a poem for 2021? Or any lines that make you think? Anybody need more time with reading, rereading it? So what do you got? What do you see? What do you think? What do you wonder? All those questions. I do want to point out on the text that you have, we braved with a B, a letter B as in boy, or bread. We've braved the belly of the beast. It's an important distinction because I have no idea what it would mean to grave with a G. What's in there? And how come? What do you see? Any of them. All of them. Any and all. What do you want to respond to? You pick something. What stands out?
I mean, just like how she like, kind of like, I don't know how to say it, kind of like
Definitely some. You can tell she's got some flow, right? Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Jen? Mm-hmm.
and like it's not broken, but it's something that's finished. It's like think of something valuable being left unfinished or completed. It's not destroyed, it's just.
Well, and weathered is not necessarily. It's not necessarily destroyed or broken down. So an item that is weathered, sometimes you want that. That is a feature that you want, like your glove, your mitt. You want that to be weathered, right? You want it to be flexible and um, a lot of leather looks better weathered. And to weather something, what does that mean? To what? No, no. To face it, to get through it. Okay. To weather a storm is to see your way through like a massive tornado or a thunderstorm or a snowstorm.
So to weather the storm is to make it through to the other side. What else? What else jumps out to you? And folks at home, feel free to engage. Nick?
She doesn't seem like she says something. Never-ending shade.
Yeah, very nice. That light. So she opens with the light and closes with the light and the shade. Absolutely. And we saw her do that in the TED Talk, right? So I mean, she's got style. Okay. What else? Parker? Right. Right. Is there anything that sounds familiar to you? And you don't have to answer that question, Sam. Go ahead. Sure. To drive it home, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. A lot of alliteration, and the rhyme too. Nathan, what were you going to say? Did I see your hand up? I thought I saw your hand up. No? Okay. All right. What else? Other things? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of up to us and newer generations to not only add our own like positives to the nation and to like the world, but
Right.
also our job to undo what was given.
Right. Right. Absolutely. There's actually a Constitution reference. I don't know if you saw that in there. We've talked about how in the preamble that the Constitution has been written in order to form a more perfect union. And so we've got yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we're striving to form a union that is perfect. We're striving to forge our union with purpose. There's an Abraham Lincoln allusion in there too. Very top on the of the second page for us. You guys don't have pages. We lay down our arms so that we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. In Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address, he talks about with malice toward none. And evidently, somebody in my AP Lit class was telling me that there's actually, she deliberately put in 2 allusions to Hamilton lyrics. Is anybody aware of that? Did you catch any of those? So the scripture reference is one of them. Sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. And I can't remember. I don't think that it's Hamilton. I think that is Burr. And then it might be, because I've only seen it once, but I've heard it a lot. I think it's somehow we do it. Yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Does that seem like it might be it? And there's there may be a reference to some other valuable pieces as well. Has its eyes on us. History has its eyes. You guys have a good weekend, and catch up in the reading so that we can really get at the reading.